soul, which has in many ways been such support for my work over the past years, and to meet friends and colleagues and teachers over the last few days. So thank you very much. I'm a member of an organization called RIOS, a global organization. Pardon? No, it's supposed to be like that. It's going to just be for now, sorry. But we'll bring a picture later, yeah. Okay. So, I work with an organization that helps people move forward together on their most important and intractable issues. We work on issues like health, food, development, peace in the Americas, Europe, Africa, the Middle East, Asia, and always working with multiple actors, government, business, academics, artists, activists. And this is the work that I have been doing for over 20 years. And the great thing about doing one thing for over 20 years is that you have lots of opportunity for trial and lots of opportunity for error. And so what I wanted to talk to you about today is what I have learned from this 20 years of trial and error. The primary observation that I have made is that those of us who are trying to move forward on important issues often find ourselves stuck. And the reason we find ourselves stuck is not hard to understand. It was explained very well in an article about 15 years ago by Peter Senge and Otto Scharmer. It has to do with the nature of complex systems that we're part of. On the one hand, we're trying to move forward, always embedded in larger systems that we cannot change alone. Secondly, the only way to work on these larger systems is to work not just with friends and colleagues, but also with strangers and opponents. And thirdly, what is required to move forward in these situations is not only to use what we have used before, but to discover new ways forward. So the question that I have been asking myself for these more than 20 years is, how can we deal with this situation? How can we move forward faced or in these situations of complexity? How can we not only think about the way forward, but as Jacques said, how can we act and effect change in complex situations? And when I observe myself, when I observe the people that I work with, when I observe actors in the world, I discover that there are two basic ways of trying to move forward. So now you'll be relieved, the first picture, yeah. So on peut voir le premier. The first of mine. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. So the first way of trying to move forward has to do with using power. It has to do with assertion, mobilizing energy, pushing. And we can see this at all levels in the systems we're working with. In organizations, whether they're commercial organizations or social organizations, this shows up as entrepreneurialism, as action. My teacher, Kees van der Leyen, used to talk about organizations being filled with energetic problem solvers, people who are trying to get stuff done with this assertion, this mobilization, this pushing. We see it in the social realm with social movements, with people getting together and trying together to move a situation forward. And we can see this at the level of the individual as self-expression. I have this idea, I have this vision, I have this destiny, how can I move forward? So this is the first way of trying to make a difference in the world, and it sounds good, doesn't it? Well, it is good. It is a generative force. It's a force that can create movement in the world, and the difficulty is that it can go too far. I think one of the most helpful explanations I ever heard of personal development is the idea that weaknesses can often be understood simply as overdone strengths. So what happens when this strength or this generative drive of power, of assertion is overdone? It looks like steamrolling. It looks like moving forward no matter what is in our way. If something is in our way, we need to defeat it, we need to win over it, or if it's really in our way, we need to destroy it. And these are the two sides of power. We often see this degenerative face of power. It's familiar to us at the level of the organization. It shows up as an organization doing what it wants to do without any regard for the context, for the community, for the environment. You could call it a global, you could call it corporate social irresponsibility. We see it globally. The most simple and important example with global warming, that we're all just trying to do what we want to do, go where we want to go, take planes, heat our houses, just do our thing. But when we all do that without regard for the balance, the global ecological balances, the result is global warming. And we see that at the level of the individual, where I'm trying to get what I want, I'm trying to get where I want to go, and I end up usually inadvertently bullying people who are in my way. So we see these two dimensions, or these two aspects of power, the generative aspect and then overdone the degenerative aspect, very clearly. The second way of trying to make a difference in the world, I call love. And I'm not talking here about romance, although there is a relation, but I'm talking specifically about this move to engage, to collaborate, to embrace, to bring together the parts which have been separated. And again, we can see this at many levels. We can see it between organizations. I've been involved with some of you, Pierre Boirin, André Van Heemstra, and others, working on food systems, bringing together different companies and ONGs and foundations and farmer groups and researchers to try to work together, to collaborate in order to address problems in food systems. We see it in societies. This was the effort in South Africa that Jacques alluded to, of trying to find a way through the stuckness of apartheid by bringing together different parts of the South African society. And we see it between individuals in efforts to engage directly and honestly with approaches which you are familiar with, such as nonviolent communication. What is usually not well understood, though, is that this force also, overdone, has a degenerative side. So again, the overdone strength of engaging, collaborating, embracing shows up as manipulating, emasculating, and suffocating, where I want so much for the parts to be brought together. I want so much for oneness that I end up pushing down or denying the power or the individuality or the self-expression of the parts. And we see this again at all levels. We see it within organizations. where we say that there is no hierarchy, we deny the power differences in the organization, but denying power doesn't make it go away. It just means it shows up in dysfunction and stuckness. So we see it in organizations with this facade of equality or this facade of flatness, which suffocates and prevents forward movement. I was a few weeks ago in Armenia. I have never been to a post-Soviet society, and listening to people talk about what they remember of the communist era, this idea that the enforced oneness showed up as a prevention of the expression and the entrepreneurialism and the identity of individuals in that society. We see it in individual relations in the family, where the embrace that weakens, the embrace which suffocates. So these are what I have observed is that there are these two ways of trying to create forward movement in social systems at all scales: the organizational level, the societal level, the individual level. There is the approach of power, which has both a generative and overdone, a degenerative side, and the aspect or the drive of love, which has a generative and, when overdone, a degenerative side. Now, here's where I think it gets interesting. What is it that makes power degenerative rather than generative? It is the absence of love, the absence of connection, the absence of, or the denial of connection. Not the absence of connection, but the denial of connection. And what is it that makes love degenerative rather than generative? It is the denial of power or of self-realization. Denying it doesn't make it go away, but it makes it go underground. And this perfect symmetry between power and love was expressed precisely in one of the final speeches which Martin Luther King Jr. made before he was assassinated, where he said, "Power without love is reckless and abusive." Power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. This conflict between immoral power and powerless morality is the central crisis of our time. So this connection between power and love is what I have focused on. And there's a way of understanding this. It was at a Seoul meeting where one of you pointed out to me that such polarities, such dilemmas, can be understood very well using the framework of the polarity framework of Barry Johnson, who makes the point that, like breathing out and breathing in, these two ways of operating are both legitimate, but you can't keep breathing in. You suffer a deficiency of you suffer an excess of oxygen. You have to breathe out, but you can't keep breathing out. You suffer a deficiency of oxygen. You have to breathe in. And this is the way I have found it very helpful to think about the connection of power and love, that they represent a permanent tension, that we cannot choose. If we choose just power, we end up with the degenerative aspects, recklessness and abuse. If we choose just love, we end up with the degenerative aspects, sentimentality and anemia and stasis. And that in Johnson's framework, the key is how long you wait before you switch from one another. And here let me make this point with reference to the work that Chaiwat and I have been doing in Thailand, because this is the clearest expression I have seen of these two or these twin dangers. On the one hand, you have people who are concerned about the situation, people who say, this is not as it should be, we need to get together, we need to assert, we need to mobilize, we need to organize manifestations, we need to push to try to change things. In this case, from November 30th, the mass demonstrations in Bangkok. When you do that, when you assert power, you get resistance. The people who disagree push back, in this case, the government, the forces loyal to the government, and you see a polarization. If this continues, you end up with the degenerative form of power, the steamrolling, this violence, the destruction, and in Thailand this has shown up as a fear or a deep concern many times over the past months, including this past week, of the possibility of civil war. So this is what happens if you keep going down on the power side. The point is, in the Johnson framework, to try to move to the other leg, to move to the other move, in this case the love move, before you go all the way down. So it is the darker arrow, the blue arrow, and to try to engage, to dialogue, and this is the work that Chai Watt and I and our colleagues have been involved in. But it's important there too to realize that this also can only go on for so long before people start to feel that they are compromising, they are giving up what they believe in, they are having to abandon what it is that's important to them. And the risk, which was expressed very clearly 2 days ago with this declaration of martial law, the risk is that in an attempt to keep the situation calm, to keep the country united, we end up with a suffocation, and specifically the suffocation of martial law, of a coup d'etat, of the inability for people to express themselves politically or socially or culturally. And so this dynamic tension and needing to move back and forth, not to go all the way down to the bottom, but when we see that love and dialogue is reaching its limits, to move to power and assertion, and when that reaches its limits. And this is the dynamic movement. Very much like trying to walk on 2 feet, where we don't move both feet forward together, we move one and then the other, and one and then the other. So this then is my understanding of what it takes to move forward, what it takes to get unstuck in these situations of complexity. What it takes is to recognize that both power and love are required, and that they're not the same. That they might be in some abstract way, at some higher level, to be 2 faces of the same thing, but that they represent distinct movements, distinct drives, and that what is crucial is not to confuse them, not to choose one or the other, and not to fuse them, but to learn to work both with power and with love. The second thing that is crucial is not to try to weaken the one which is stronger. Some of us find are more comfortable, more accomplished with power, but we say, well, you know, I'm comfortable with this power thing, love, that's for home, it's not for the workplace. But when I assert myself, people tell me that I'm being a bully. And so what I want to do is I'm going to try to hold back my power. And the love people say, well, this power thing, I don't like it. It causes too much destruction. I'm more comfortable with this embracing, with this opening, with this dialogue. But when I open myself up, I get hurt. So I'm going to try not to open myself up too much. And this is a mistake to weaken the aspect which is stronger. On the contrary, what is required is to strengthen the aspect which is weaker. For the power people to work on their love side, for the love people to work on their power side. And finally, what is required is not to try to achieve a static balance. People sometimes say, well, yes, I get this power and love. What does it look like when it's exactly in balance? And I'll just aim for that. And I think this is really, conceptually this is correct, but practically it is incorrect. There is no static balance. On the contrary, there is only the dynamic balance, like walking, and the practice. Let me exercise power when I feel when it seems to be going too far, slipping into its degeneracy. Let me exercise love, power, love, power, love, power. And it's only in this way of learning to work with both of these drives, both of these aspects, that we can achieve mastery in dealing with complex challenges, that gradually we can integrate these two within ourselves, and in this way can get unstuck and move forward. Thank you very much. So according to the 3 or 4 people that have given me the same instruction, we have exactly 19 minutes left. So I would like to see whether it's possible to have a conversation about this. I'm interested in what struck you about this, and what I'm particularly interested in is what in this framework provoked you. What seemed different or unsettling? Not the way in which this is the same as what you knew, but what is the part of this that is difficult, which is challenging? So maybe we just take a minute just with your neighbor. What about this model or this way of thinking about things is unsettling or challenging? And then we'll talk. So just a minute, buzz with your neighbor, not the big group, just with the person sitting next to you.